Uh, Thank you. We are recording this, which I think everyone was just reminded of. This is the second of our candidate forums for candidates for school committee. Tonight, we will hear from the 4 candidates for the at-large positions, and we are very much looking forward to hearing their comments. Our program this evening will be facilitated by Noe Medina, and translation services for anyone who is interested in Spanish translation would be provided by Yolanda Simeone. Yolanda, would you wave? And she has put instructions. There are instructions in the chat to access that if you are interested. We're going to begin our program this evening with a presentation on the consent decree that was reached by the city, the school district, and the group of plaintiffs here in Worcester. But right now, I'm going to hand the talking stick over to Noe Medina. Noe.
Welcome, folks. Welcome, candidates. Let me introduce Fred Taylor, the NAACP, to do a quick presentation on the school committee consent decree and new structure of the school committee. Fred, I'll turn it over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, Fred.
Welcome. Happy Wednesday. Is today Wednesday? All right. Happy Wednesday, everybody. Yeah, so I'm going to just speak just for a few minutes, give a small presentation on the lawsuit. I'm just going to give a quick overlay. I do have a PowerPoint that I'm going to use to guide us and guide me through this presentation. So without further ado, if we can have someone put that PowerPoint up, I'll greatly appreciate it. All right, so you know, this is a voters' rights lawsuit. That's what we filed, and that's what we named it because we felt like that's exactly what it was. We're fighting for voters' rights. Next slide, please. 1980, 43 years ago, you see the 2 graphs we have on the screen. On the left, you see a population. What's the population in 1980? You can see, you know, the demographical shift 38 years later. You know, at that time, it was about 93% white or Caucasian population in the city of Worcester in 1980. Fast forward 38 years later, and you see the population has gone down to about, I would say, 60%. Next slide, please. So this is just a snapshot picture, demographics of some of the students in Worcester Public Schools, and there are also a couple adults in the photo also. Next slide. So there are many issues that face the city of Worcester, but we boiled it down to 3 issues that we wanted to pinpoint. Those are school discipline disparities, services for English language learners, and also closing the achievement gap. These are some things that we really wanted to get at, and we felt like this lawsuit would help address some of those issues. Next slide, please. So, you know, a lot of people wonder what power does the school committee have in Worcester? We'll just let people know. They set policy for Worcester Public Schools. They hire the superintendent, and they review and approve budgets. All these things impact our students heavily. So these are, you know, really tough duties that the school committee has in the city of Worcester. Next slide, please. So at the time of this lawsuit, the Worcester School Committee, this is what the Worcester School Committee looked like. And looking at, you know, the school committee back then in 2021, we felt like we needed to change because looking at that doesn't represent the students of Worcester. We all saw the photo of, you know, what the demographics are in 2019. Next slide. So as we can say, you can see the comparison right there, 70% people of color students. And if you look at who was representing them, making decisions in their lives, no people of color on that. So next slide, please. 2009 to 2019, You can see on the chart on the left, we only had one Latina representative with the school district. So one person of color in that period of time. And if you look at the population during, roughly the same time, and you look at the demographics, a big shift if you look at that pie chart on the right. Next slide, please. Why? Why did we bring this lawsuit? We brought this lawsuit because all 6 school committee members elected was an at-large process, and we felt like that was a violation of the citizens, the students, and everyone's rights in the city of Worcester. So we felt like the only way we can correct that is to bring a lawsuit and force change, and that's what we did. Contrast that with the districts. In an at-large system, 51% of the voters can win 100% of the seats. And if you look at the demographics for the representatives on that photo that I showed, a majority part of those people came from 2 specific districts, which is very unfair for all the people who live throughout the city. Next slide, please. Just look at this chart here that tells like who got what votes from what demographics in the city of Worcester in the year of 2019. Just leave that there for 1 second so the people that are watching can take a second to look at that.
Fred, I just want to remind you, we're on a very short timeline, so.
Next slide, please. Next slide. So Brian O'Connell was also on the ballot. You can see that he got almost 4,000 votes. That's 45% of what the highest vote getter got. And he's he was deceased. Next slide. Same type of chart. We can just go through this. Time crunch. So the Voting Rights Act, the reason that the Voting Rights Act was brought forth was to prohibit discriminatory voting practices, whether they were intentional or not, to remove any obstacles, were also known as Jim Crow laws. And then we felt that this lawsuit was definitely, the system in Worcester was a structural barrier. That's why we brought this lawsuit. Next slide. Similar to Worcester, Lowell did a lawsuit earlier before we did, and that was like a good blueprint for what we had. Next slide, please. So their lawsuit started in 2017. It was settled 2 years later. In 2021, the law came into effect. These are the 2 minority districts in Lowell. They were Asian and Latino and Latina. That was their majority minority population. Next slide. So February 2021, as I mentioned before, we filed our lawsuit. The city council, unfortunately, it wasn't a unanimous vote. It should have been, but it was a unanimous vote. They voted 8-3 to enter a consent decree, which started a process. We did some public listening sessions. Both sides agreed that these were the 3 options that we would use to decide what our system's going to be. When all is said and done, we chose option 3, which is 6 district seats and 2 at-large, with the mayor being the tiebreaker. Next slide, please. So as you can see, we have 2 minority districts. They're marked out in the arrows, B and D. Those are our majority districts. Next slide, please. I just want to say, we were successful, and thanks for the councils that voted for it. And I really want to give a big shout out to Brown Rutnick and Lawyers for Civil Rights, who are our legal allies, and also the courageous plaintiffs that put their name out there. The organizations, the NAACP, Worcester Interfaith, 4 Black representatives and 4 Latino representatives that brought this lawsuit forward. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Fred. We appreciate that background on this. Really useful. We want to move now to candidate statements. Each candidate has 4 minutes. I want to encourage candidates to stay within the 4-minute time limit. I will let you know when the 4 minutes are up and you can finish your statement, but we are pressed for time today. So please honor the time limits. We have randomly generated the order of presentations, and we'll be sort of rotating people and responding to the questions. So let me introduce Sue Mailman first to give the first presentation.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sue Mailman, and I'm running for what would be my second term to the Worcester School Committee. I'm running for one of 2 at-large seats. I ran in 2021 because I was concerned with the district's leadership and the direction. Many in the community were concerned about the same thing, and the business community also shared these concerns. I believe and still believe that our city is just the right size to create one of the strongest urban districts in our country. I'd like to tell you about my background and then close by telling you about my priorities as a school committee member. I'm 61 years old and I've worked in my family business for 40 years. Similarly to many Worcester Public School students, I started work full-time at 18 as a bank teller. I went to school nights at Quincy, Worcester State, and Assumption. I applied for an executive MBA at Northeastern and received my MBA at the age of 39. I've been married twice to 2 good men, to 2 good, kind men, and I have a total of 6 stepchildren. My son, Jeff, was born in 1986 and died in 2007 at the age of 21. A life-altering experience for any parent, and certainly for me as well. No doubt that loss has shaped me and increases my sense of urgency about improving our little corner of the world. I have been privileged to work on many boards and committees that directly relate to education and workforce development. I was general chair of Worcester Vocational Advisory at Worcester Tech for 12 years. I chaired the board at Quincy for 7 years. I've served on both the statewide workforce board and also our local workforce board. I've chaired the board of the Chamber of Commerce. At the heart of all those experiences was the knowledge that our K-12 public education system needs to be the best it can be to offer our students the greatest opportunities. They deserve these opportunities. Some of the non-business related boards like the YWCA, Community Legal Aid, and United Way have informed my strong views that equity and social emotional health and robust community partnerships are required to provide our students the very best of a rounded education. Lastly, as an employer, I know that the people that work for my company are largely public school graduates. Our next generation of skilled tradespeople, estimators, project managers, truck drivers are vital members of our community. During the course of my first campaign, the prior school committee voted to not renew the former superintendent's contract. They then proceeded to embark on a nationwide search. When the current school committee began their term, we spent the first number of months completing the search process and hiring Dr. Rachel Monarez. She began her tenure in July of 2022. During the 22-23 school year, I watched a new leader come into our district and create her own leadership team. You could see the team gel at our school committee meetings. I believe this is a special skill of Dr. Monarez, and as time has moved along, I have only grown to admire her skills as a leader. We have been fortunate to have a school committee that has worked collaboratively in support of the new superintendent, holding her accountable, yet allowing her the time to assess our district, form relationships, and create a plan to move forward. In closing, my priorities are expanding vocational education and career readiness program, investing in school buildings, building a diverse workforce, and fostering community partnerships. Our job as school committee members is about policy, budget, and advocacy, not managing the day-to-day operations of our schools. I know that my work ethic and sense of urgency provides the schools a strong voice to support excellence and achievement for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Let me introduce Laura Clancy to speak next. Laura?
Thank you. I'm in between homework here, so yeah. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay. So thank you. Sorry, I'm in between homework. So my name is Laura Clancy and I'm running for my third term on the Worcester School Committee. A little bit about my background. I hold a bachelor's degree in early childhood education and psychology from Worcester State University. And I was awarded my master's degree in educational psychology from American International College. I'm a proud Worcester Public School parent, and I have two daughters in the school system. My daughter Addison is a junior at Doherty, and my daughter Tegan is in first grade at Nelson Place. I'm very active in the community. I coach softball. I have been board members of Joe Schwartz Little League, and I am the past and current president of PTO president at Nelson Place. I am a current educator, and I have a licensed guidance counselor with over 17 years experience working with students involved in the juvenile justice system. My time on school committee started in January of 2020, and we shut the schools down 72 days later. Throughout this time, we were navigating daily calls from families, staff, students. We were on daily union meetings and trying to navigate constant policy changes while still holding regular school committee meetings. And actually, during that first year, we doubled the amount of meetings that we typically hold in a school year. But we needed to make sure that our students were fed, were safe, and were educated. During this time, never once did I use the excuse that I'm new to this and I don't know. I had to know. There were three of us, including the mayor, who were still on the school committee from then, and no one can take away the incredible work that we did during this time, a time that no one else has ever had to face, and I hope we never have to again. But since getting back into the students and staff safely back into the classrooms, we've been able to focus on the impact of the pandemic while we are reaching one of my biggest goals, which is to provide top-notch education for our students. Throughout my almost 4 years on the school committee, I've requested administration to work with community counseling agencies, to have the ability to come into our schools on a day-to-day basis to provide counseling services to our students in conjunction with our staff. We hired a new superintendent we have seen the great morale in our schools with this change. The team she has put in place is incredible. And as somebody who works as an outside agency along with the school district, I have found the communication to be much better. And I've been hearing the same from most of our local agencies. We've also made significant improvements on communication with our caregivers and our students. We definitely still have room to grow. And this has been one thing that I've been pushing for since I first ran 4 years ago. We also, as many know, we've took in-house transportation, and that is one vote that I'm very proud of. And as a parent, I no longer sit at my daughter's school bus worrying about where she is. I am also chair of Governance and Employee Issues Subcommittee. And along with Member Novick, we've undertaken a huge project with updating our outdated policies. I've been part and continue to be part of union negotiating team since March of 2020. And I'm proud to say that we have worked hard to secure one of the best contracts that our educators have seen in over 20 years. And many say that experience matters, and I could not agree more. I have some of the most experience on this committee. I have the kids in the schools. I am an educator that works with the schools, that no one else can say that. And I do believe that experience matters and living the experience matters. And I look forward to continuing my work on the Worcester School Committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate that. Maureen Beninda next. Maureen?
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Maureen Benenda. I believe my 47 years in public education makes me the most qualified candidate for the Worcester School Committee. Let me share my Worcester Public Schools experience with you. I was 6 years experience as superintendent of the Worcester Public Schools. I was responsible for providing high quality instruction for 25,000 students in the Worcester Public Schools, supervision of 5,000 employees, working with architects and construction companies for the construction of 2 MSBA high school construction projects, the opening of South High Community School, and the development of Doherty Memorial School. I was responsible for the implementation of school committee policies and the daily operation of the school system. As superintendent, my team, under my leadership, led this district successfully through COVID. I have 8 years' experience as principal of South High Community School, 14 years' experience as assistant principal at South High Community School, and 18 years' experience as a teacher, a department head, and a coach. I believe in building bridges and collaborating with community agencies. I believe I add sincerity and integrity. I have proven that through my 47 years as an educator and will continue to do so if elected to the school committee. I am here to support and collaborate for educational excellence for all students, to ensure their success and to strengthen our community's future. Here are my goals. 1, and most important, provide a safe school environment for all students. Review current discipline policies and practices, including input from principals, staff members, PTOs, and school council members, as well as students themselves. We all have a vested interest in the safety and security of every single person, whether student or staff. 2, identify and work collaboratively with all stakeholders from the student body and experts to develop policy that furthers the academic access and equity for all our students. 3, monitor the fiscal budget, ensure that funding is used in a strategic and cost-effective way to address the needs of the district. And 4, connect schools with the community to provide additional academic, cultural, and civic opportunities for students to learn and thrive. We need to inspire our students to see themselves reflected in all the different spaces and careers in our community. And the best way to do that is to ensure they have ample opportunities to access these spaces and grow. Finally, I am committed to this community, the city of Worcester. I want to continue to do all that I can to make a difference for our children and continue to share my expertise in assisting and supporting the Worcester Public Schools to move forward with a common agenda of providing the best well-rounded education for all our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Let me invite Tracy Novick to speak now. Tracy?
Thank you. My name is Tracy O'Connell Novick, and I'm currently in my 5th term on the Worcester School Committee. I'm seeking a 6th term. I'm the mother of 3 children, 2 of whom are Worcester Public School graduates, 1 of whom is in their senior year at Burncoat High School, where they are in the dual language program, which they've been in since kindergarten. I'm a former high school English and history teacher in Massachusetts Public Schools. And I now work in school policy and finance within the school committee realm. I'm a licensed school business administrator in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I have to say, as someone who has run for re-election before, I've never run for re-election at a time in which I was so proud of the work of the school committee and the administration within the previous term. This school committee has worked extraordinarily well from the very beginning in terms of the work that needed to be done. As was already mentioned by my colleagues, the first thing that we tackled together, which was obviously crucial, was the national search for a new superintendent. It was a comprehensive national search, which I advocated for from the very beginning. And I would point to the results because we have an excellent superintendent who has come in and done a thorough review of the systems that we were lacking and put into place the supports that our schools actually need, and has been moving forward in a comprehensive fashion with making sure that the climate and culture of our schools for our students and for our staff is the kind of place that they deserve. We, of course, have implemented district operated transportation, and much like my colleague, Ms. Clancy, who I've also experienced sitting at bus stops, although in my case, it was finding out that my child was left on a street corner in negative 15-degree weather for 45 minutes because a bus didn't come. I know for parents and for staff, I don't really need to say more about the success. I would note that we've received both state and national recognition for the success of our district operating transportation. And there isn't a week that goes by where I don't both get questions from other school committees and also note that there are still lots of headlines across the country of difficulties that other districts are having that Worcester is not. The Worcester School Committee successfully advocated for an increase in the MSBA budget line. We actually had a 3-part advocacy, and all of those successfully passed the state budget. The first thing that Worcester is going to see on that is that the inflation for Doherty is at least in part going to be picked up by the state. We've actually seen an increase in the MSBA line, which should allow for them to actually put back into place the accelerated repair program, which Worcester, of course, has historically done quite well by, and gives us at least a little bit more hope for Burncoat finally possibly making it into the system. I will say that I never run across someone from the Mass School Building Authority without being greeted, without opening my mouth, as yes, Tracy, we know you need a new Burncoat. And I also want to note that we're in the 3rd year of the Student Opportunity Act, which is something that I started advocating for pretty much when my children started school in Worcester 17 years ago. I attended and gave testimony before the Foundation Budget Review Commission. I attended all of their meetings and covered them closely, then was active in the fight to finally bring forward, after multiple rounds and multiple terms and multiple years, the Student Opportunity Act. That's going to bring $100 million more yearly into the Worcester Public Schools. And that is something that I'm not taking credit for because I'm taking credit for it. I'm taking credit for it because credit has been given to me by those who actually were successful across the state. I was reflecting yesterday as the accountability results came out from the 2023 MCAS and other results, that this change in administration and the collaboration of the school committee and the collaboration of administration with the community, which was something that was very badly missing previously, has actually put us in a much better position than I would be concerned about previously. So I'm hoping to continue that in another term. Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. Sorry to interrupt you there. I apologize. So we're going to ask some questions now and invite the candidates to respond. I'll tell you what the question is, and then I'll go ahead and, call on each of you to respond in order. You'll have 4 minutes to respond. So the first question: when data is disaggregated by race, income, language status, disability, and other measures, significant and persistent disparities are revealed. How would you work with the district administration to understand these disparities and to address them? So first, Maureen, I'll invite you to respond to that question.
I'm unmuted, yes.
Yeah.
So first of all, I've had experience already doing all of that. We have been looking at data for a very long time in the Worcester Public Schools, and it's always broken up by all those areas. And so what I would continue to do, as school committee is not supposed to get involved in the daily operation of the school district. It would be just really to have that conversation to see where I could help support them. The first thing I think with data is you have to be able to have somebody that understands data and is able to look at it and present it clearly and accurately. So once, when I was the superintendent, how we did it is a data person looked at the data, broke it up. We met with principals. We also met with teams of teachers and individual schools. We also shared it with school council. And we looked at what areas of our data definitely needed to be improved. But beyond that, we also looked at what standards, for example, if it was an ELA score for school in English. We would also look at the standards, because when you get the, say we're looking at just MCAS scores, you get the MCAS back. It is broken up for each of the standards that kids are being tested for. And then we would look at the standards and try to decide, what could we do to improve those areas that our students needed. In the area of discipline, in the area of attendance, obviously those are conversations that you have to have with principals regarding what other alternatives can we use for student discipline, because as you know, I believe that every single student deserves the opportunity to have academic success, but it has to be in a safe learning environment. And work on respect, consideration for the rights of others. Students are expected to conduct themselves in a way that their rights and privileges of others are not violated. And so work on areas on how to get that school culture so that all those things can be accomplished. Also is really a deep conversation with the leaders of the school. As far as involving the community in the discussion about the data, I think it's really important that both the school district and whatever community group we're presenting to have a real clear understanding of the data, that it's presented accurately, and that we come to it as partners on how to solve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Repeat the question again. Tracy, I'll sort of ask you to respond. When data is disaggregated by race, income, language status, disability, and other measures, significant and persistent disparities are revealed. How would you work with district administration to understand these disparities and to address them? Tracy?
Thank you for the question, because I think that the first thing is actually knowing what the job of the school committee is, which we didn't really just get an answer to. The first thing, of course, is making sure that the appropriate supports are in place. And when it comes to the school committee perspective on that, the two places where we have the most influence on that are budget and policy. So are we actually making sure that we're spending our resources in ways that put additional support towards the places where additional support actually is needed? One thing that when I pulled up the disaggregated data on the district website yesterday, the state website yesterday when we had the accountability results released, is I was really struck by, in looking at the disaggregated data, by the things that this current administration actually already had influence over. So if you look, for example, at our chronic absenteeism rate last year, we actually got all of the points available on that. Whereas when we had things that actually are longer term, we actually have some really, really huge gaps in the attainment of proficiency in terms of our English learners. And luckily, and this is again, sort of a second sort of school committee role, right? You can make sure that the administration is actually putting into place the supports that they need, and then we evaluate the superintendent based on that. And we know that one of the things that we were really lacking previously was that structural support for English language learners across the district. We have new leadership being put into place there. We know that the administration has been putting into place a new structure, which we've then supported with budget in terms of what they're calling the Q teams, which are actually going out into the schools and actually providing that support at the school level. And as was mentioned earlier by one of my colleagues, one of the other things we've been doing is we've been doing a comprehensive look at our policies. And one of the ongoing works of school committee is to make sure that your policies don't have inequitable impacts on students. So you can easily see that, for example, in the disparity in disciplinary rates. And of course, that was such an ongoing issue over the past number of years that we ended up getting the congressman involved in order to actually finally get the data. We have luckily come out of that. And one of the things that we've actually been looking at, the state, of course, has actually changed state regulation regarding state law and then state regulation regarding student discipline. And part of what we're actually now doing is actually implementing that. And what does that look like? And how are you making sure that the enormous gaps that we've previously seen, particularly around special education, around young men of color, are no longer happening by virtue of the policies themselves actually being written in ways that are unnecessarily discriminatory. We've seen that in very straightforward ways around things like how we've changed our dress code, but that is an examination that the school committee needs to continually be making, in my view. Policy is a job that's actually never done, and we need to make sure that the school committee members, first of all, are aware of which part of this is theirs, and then is making sure that they're actually continually doing that job, because that is something that we need to continue to strive to do better at.
Thank you. Thank you, Tracy, for that response. So I'll have Sue respond. I can repeat the question again if you'd like, Sue. When data is disaggregated by race, income, language status, disability, and other measures, significant and persistent disparities are revealed. How would you work with the district administration to understand these disparities and to address them? Sue? Oh, you're muted still.
Thank you for the question. You know, possibly the most important question of the day, frankly, and a question that seems to me to have been ongoing across the state in our district for way too long. We've talked about Student Opportunity Act funding and the improvement, and districts like Worcester are supposed to be getting more dollars to help us address these disparities. We have to take this seriously. One of the things that I've learned in my first term, and I'll use the finance and operations example of, you know, our focus on busing. And we were getting a new system off the ground, as Tracy mentioned. We've gotten accolades about that implementation. We got to make sure it keeps going. But that same kind of attention is what is needed in this area as well. And we need an entire leadership team that acknowledges that we are not doing well, being able to speak up and say, this is a problem. We've, as a district, have not paid enough attention and have not even necessarily acknowledged over the years that this was an issue. So I am looking forward to this, to the work of the new administration, really focusing on this topic. And all the data is at our fingertips, right? It's all at the state. We can focus on it. We can be bringing these in all of our subcommittees that we're dealing with, which is something that we're going to be taking a look at, the new subcommittees for the next term. But this is all of our work, and it starts, frankly, with the leadership of the district. And it starts with that entire leadership team that is saying, yes, this is a priority. We all get it. We all acknowledge it. It's not about defensiveness. It's about offensiveness, and saying we can be a district that can actually improve the lives of all of our students by high standards across all disparity groups that we think about. So I think that we have to be serious. We have to acknowledge it, and we have to look the data in the eye and talk about it on a regular basis. That's what I'd say.
Thank you, Sue. Appreciate your response there. And finally, Laura, if I can repeat it again. When data is disaggregated by race, income, language status, disability, and other measures, significant and persistent disparities are revealed. How would you work with the district administration to understand these disparities and to address them? Laura?
Thank you. So I will say the first thing is that we own it. I remember for numerous years we had asked for data, and it was very reluctant to get it to us. And now we see an administration who's very open and honest to give us what we're looking for. And not that to penalize anyone or degrade anyone for what things are going on in their schools, but to really truly say, we have this area, this issue, we need to look further into it so that we can make impacts, especially like colleague Novick had mentioned regarding budget policies. So we as school committee members, like I said, we need to look at where we're putting our money. And we need to make sure that administration is looking at these disparities at the school level so that we are being asked, you know, what they need and how we can support them. And much work has gone into this year to improve the culture and the morale in our school. And that has a lot to do with that. We're really honing in on the data, taking a look at it to make sure that we're making the changes where they need, and we're supporting our principals and our staff in our schools, that they're provided with the training, which we're seeing a huge trainings, much more going on in our district than we ever had in the past, that we're supporting them through training, that we're supporting them with staff that they feel that they need, especially one thing that we're honed in on is rep coordinators for every school, our counselors, and that we've really made some changes throughout the district. And I think that's really where it's very important. We got to look at our budget and our policies to make sure that equity is across our school district.
Thank you, Laura. So we have a second question we want to pose to all four of you. And follow the same order here. For the second question is to do with the first question. The second question, and so Maureen will be responding first. The second question, Given that a majority of the students in Worcester are kids of color and a majority of the teaching force is white, how might Worcester recruit, retain, and cultivate more teachers of color? Maureen?
Okay, so actually, as superintendent, I actually hired more teachers and administrators of color than any other administration had actually done. So how do we do it? There were two really successful ways. The first was we have instructional assistants in the Worcester Public Schools who are dedicated to the Worcester Public Schools. Many of them, due to whatever circumstances they had in their life, were not able to finish their education, yet they have such great skills. They plan on making a career in the Worcester Public Schools. So in partnership with Worcester State, I started a very successful program where the paraprofessionals actually get free courses at Worcester State University. We provided the courses after school and also during the night. We provided 5 retired teachers to be their mentors, because many of our paraprofessionals had not been to school in a very long time. And through the time I was superintendent, many of them graduated and became teachers, and we offered them a promise. So if they went through that program as a paraprofessional, there were a few that had degrees in other areas, not in education, that needed to get their certification. We promised to hire them, and we did hire them. So that's the first one. The other is Worcester Future Teachers. As a teacher, school I was at, South High Community School, was the only high school that continued to have Worcester Future Teachers after it was not funded by grant. So we had a large group of students, mostly students of color, that were interested in being teachers, and I ran that program for the 38 years I was at South High School in partnership with Worcester State University, and that program was still running today. So I think that you hire your alumni also to come back as teachers. You provide a Chapter 74 program in education, which we have at South High School and also at Worcester Tech, where they get those opportunities to get certified, to get stackable credentials. You do the early college program, which I also started under my administration, with a lot of students involved in it. So they get used to what it means to go to college, and they have those connections with colleges, so they stay in. And I'm also on the board at Worcester State University with other superintendents and other teachers, because I also joined as a teacher, to promote education and opportunities for all students. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Thank you for that response. Tracy, let me repeat the question. Given that a majority of students in Worcester are kids of color and the majority of the teaching force is white, how might Worcester recruit, retain, and cultivate more teachers of color? Tracy?
Thank you. The first thing is that for probably much of history, teachers have come from people who felt comfortable and successful in schools. And I mean, we have a history in this country of kind of building schools around people that look like me. I mean, I was a teacher. White girls generally were pretty much the cohort that schools were most successful for. And so the first thing that we really need to be asking ourselves as a school system that doesn't look like that is, what kind of school system are we building, and what does that mean for our students? Because it's kind of hard to make the argument that you should come back as an adult and work in a system that you haven't necessarily felt belonged to you for your entire education. And that means that examination of disciplinary practices and culture and climate and how we run our classrooms. And that's all work that's actually being done right now, and very deliberately being done. And that isn't why it's being done, but that ends up then having the side effect of saying, yes, education can be a place where you may want to spend your adult life. And I mean, that is something that the state has been very deliberate in. And I feel like Worcester is finally actually joining in that perspective, which is overdue. I mean, because that's really, really important, regardless of what our students then end up choosing to do. The second thing is that you have to have hiring systems that are actually very deliberate in their practice. And for any of you who might have seen the superintendent's presentation about the opening of school, part of the conversation they had was, what do our hiring systems actually look like? And again, that's work that's been done in other districts across the state long since. There's places in the country that have done this for decades. And we're finally actually looking at those human resources perspectives of what exactly is the process that you go through in order to get hired by the Worcester Public Schools? And is that something that then is actually leading to equitable outcomes, or are we actually having implicit bias impact the thing? And as a side effect of that, but also in addition to that, you might have also seen that part of the presentation that was put on by Dr. Monares is that we have substantially increased leadership of color within the Worcester Public Schools within the last year. Within the last year, we've actually revolutionized that. And much in the way that we talk about students, you can't be what you can't see. It makes a huge difference in our classrooms, in our schools, in our system, to have leaders that actually look like the teaching cohort that we intend to end up having, that also then reflects the student body that we have. But that takes deliberate effort. It doesn't happen accidentally, and it can't happen as a side effect. I should note, by the way, Worcester Future Teacher has been funded out of the central budget for as long as I've been involved on school committee, so I'm not really sure where the question happened there. Haven't necessarily seen a lot of success in terms of those actually being teachers, but just want to make sure we're clear about that. I do think that it's important, though, to be deliberate in terms of policy and practice.
Thank you, Tracy. Appreciate that response. Sue, next. Again, the question, given that a majority of students in Worcester are kids of color, and the majority of the teaching force is white, how might Worcester recruit, retain, and cultivate more teachers of color? Sue?
Hi, thank you. You know, I'm thinking about the beginning of our presentation tonight and why communities in this community, why groups in this community put forth a lawsuit, because they knew that we were not representative. I think that having a school committee that is more representative of our community is part of having an accountable organization, the school committee, that is accountable to our voters and residents, paying attention and being more diverse. I mean, just who's at the table, how we support those at the table. So even for me as an old white lady, okay, I try very hard to make sure that I am engaging with young people of color to make sure they have a seat at the table on all different boards that I've served on. And I think that is critical. And I think we have to start with each of us as leaders in this organization, as leaders in the system. And so it begins with ourselves, I think. And then I think that we're able to bring more credibility to the table around this subject. I think that we need to look at Quinsig. The pipelines are incredible. We need to look at different workforce opportunities. This task is not going to be easy. The leadership difference that we've made in the last year is really an important indicator. So we have to make sure that it's not just the people that we're hiring tomorrow, but that who we're elevating and who we're giving voice to, I think, is critical. I think that the pathway, so I'm thinking about Quinsigamint, and I'm thinking Quinsig to Worcester State, or Quinsig to some of our other colleges in the region, right? We're having great success with Clark right now. So I think, using the partners we have in this city to achieve these methods, having very solid hiring practices about how we're going to be deliberate about making a change here. I think all of those things will make a big difference. But this is just ongoing work in every avenue that we have. I think apprenticeship is another model that we might think of. You know, we have vocational programs for early education, but I think that what opportunities can we provide students, like during the school year as seniors, maybe even in some of the comprehensive high schools as tutors or other kinds of things. I think we in education, just like all other industries, are going to have to be very creative about how we think about hiring and bringing people on. And I think it's a question that is, that comes up everywhere across industries, and it's most critical in our educational industry. And I think engaging with all kinds of higher ed partners is part of what we can do to make a difference. And those higher ed partners are looking for opportunities to engage. You know, our early college is increasing, so those may give us opportunities as well for different pathways to come into our system. I think so I guess I'll leave it at that for the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. So Laura, now
Thank you.
you got the question.
I don't think I need the questions again. So I work in a field where I truly, and we've seen changes over in the department that I work with within the state, that you truly need representation of your staff to represent that, you know, the students that are in front of you. It changes the culture of the school. And I think we've seen a huge change in Worcester over the last 2 years when it comes to this. I believe that we need to look at our hiring practices. Absolutely. How we're growing our own students. We need to look at our hiring sources, where we're reaching out to people for when we do. It's not just a simple put an ad on School Spring. I think we really need to delve deep into places across the country when we're hiring and looking for new staff. I do also believe that our equity office, Dr. Henry, I'm excited about that opportunity. Vaughn did a wonderful job, and I'm excited with Dr. Henry. And I think utilizing that office to get people in to our schools to reflect what our students look like is vitally important. And I think that we've seen a huge change. And I know that Tracy had referenced the presentation from the superintendent, and we have seen 15 out of 40 of our new hires for our principals and assistant directors were BIPOC, and 10 out of 27 of our hires of principals and directors and cabinets were also identified as BIPOC. Our BIPOC leaders in the last year, the rate of hire has gone up 37%. So we are clearly, this is a priority of the school district, and clearly we're doing a very good job at it. And that's just in 1 year that we've seen huge improvement. So hiring practices, resources for where we put out our jobs. And we're just doing, like I said, a great job at it, but there's definitely work that could keep going on that, but we're making vast improvements.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura, for that. So third round of questions, we're going to have individual questions, separate questions for each individual candidate. And so I'm going to start with Tracy for the first question. As a current member of the school committee and one of the longest tenured, what have you learned about the role of community in critically supporting our schools and the education of our children? Now actually, we're running a little early, so we have like 3 minutes to be able to respond.
So thank you for the question. And I appreciate the idea that one can sort of learn about this over time, because I will say that in reflecting on my own service, I think that I've gotten better at doing this over time. I think that I think you've actually kind of heard this also from my colleagues of kind of what they've learned over their terms. And I think that's important. I will say that I reflect back on when I was running to get back onto school committee. One of the things that I kept coming back to was that there was this sort of giant community outcry about, in that case, it was transportation, that was just sort of totally not being heard, and like nothing was happening. And it really wasn't until we like shifted the school committee that we finally overruled, the recommendation of the superintendent and brought district transportation in-house. And so I think there is that sort of, there are times where the community is all saying, hey, we got to do. And I think that we also, something I'm actually proud of, And I want to give credit to our colleague who's not here, who's running for District 1, Molly McCullough, in terms of this, because she was chairing the search committee, was the degree, and honestly, there's a number of you that are on here that were on the search committee, but that sort of that deep collaboration with the community in moving forward with the superintendent search of what was it that we were actually looking for. And you probably heard that from some of us in terms of our evaluation of Dr. Menares this past year, of sort of, that we had this sort of list of here are the things that we actually need. And in so many ways, she actually was being responsive to that. And of course, she started by going out and actually listening to the community again. I think you're seeing that with the way that we're redoing our strategic plan. We're making sure there's a broad-based community thing. And I mean, that can get really granular into things like, what are the community impacts of decisions that are made in various kinds of ways by the school committee. I mean, dress code, I kind of have to laugh because we have, of course, a majority, school committee that identifies as women right now. You don't have to talk to any of us about what it's like to be dress coded because we've all had it happen. And so when we have those conversations, the conversations we had around mental health support, when we had students that were there and were speaking all the time, I think that student voice on school committee is key. And one of the things I've been continuing to pressure us is to be actually, so first of all, aligned with the law, but also really authentic in making sure that we're faithful to providing that space for them to ongoingly be actually speaking at the committee meeting. And I should note that that's without administrative review. That's actually something that they need to do authentically. We had to fight for that during a previous part of the term. So, those things. And I also want to note that there's this question of whether our schools are a sort of, hostile to the community or actually welcoming to the community. And I know that there's been a really ongoing, we actually have family and community coordinators now, directors, which is a new position that was very deliberate in terms of saying, how do we make sure we make those connections?
Sorry to interrupt again, Tracy. Thank you.
No, I could go on longer. So thank you for stopping me.
My job. One of them. So I just want to note, Laura had to leave. She has her daughter's Know Your School night, so she had to leave early. So want to sort of let people know that and thank her for her participation. So next is Sue. Sue, question for you. The Worcester Education Equity Roundtable often speaks of an education ecosystem. How do you understand that concept? And what role do you think it plays, if any, in education in Worcester?
Can you repeat one more time, please?
The Worcester Education Equity Roundtable often speaks of an education ecosystem. How do you understand that concept? And what role do you believe it plays, if any, in education in Worcester?
I think that this may be too concrete an example. Because my guess is that this discussion is much broader than what I'm gonna talk about, but it kind of probably ties in a little bit to the last question about community engagement and community schools. And I think that it's been lacking for a long time. The ecosystem is our city. The ecosystem is not just our schools. The ecosystem is the broader community. And I think that we have been missing that respect for what the outside community, outside of our school doors, outside of Irving Street, what the rest of our community wants and can contribute to the education of our kids. And I think that it is so rich right now, what the breadth of what we can provide in Worcester for an ecosystem for our students. I think that our increased funding in our system is being able to utilize that so that we have the broadest education available. We have an MCAS requirement, and we're probably going to, at least for the short term and probably the longer term. How that's going to play out for graduation is a secondary question, but how do we use our ecosystem that is outside of our doors to help our kids realize the breadth of opportunity in this community right here. From higher ed to employment to the Boys and Girls Club and the YWCA and some of those kind of organizations as well. I do think that this is my first like re-election, so I'm not used to this process right now, but I think that one of the things I want to try to hold myself centered to is speaking truth and not just, talking about everything that's going great, being absolutely willing to talk about the things that we are struggling with. And I think that we have a school leadership team that is, one of the things that I would be very focused on is, are we going to be truthful with community, with parents, with each other about the struggle? And if we can do that in an open and transparent way, I think that our ecosystem the broader ecosystem becomes to be part of our system. So I don't know if that's a tough question, and I gave it a shot. So thank you.
Appreciate your response. Thank you very much. Maureen, the last question is for you now that Laura has left. So your question is, in the past year, there have been significant changes in district approaches to both student discipline and school safety. What are your thoughts on those changes?
Well, I'm very familiar with the changes that have occurred because as many people know, I was selected to be the interim superintendent in Quabog, and I was also recruited to be the interim superintendent in East Hampton. So as a superintendent, my job is to make sure that we follow the policies that are set by DESE. And one of those policies that really did affect us this year was the policy on discipline. So initially when the policy came out, it was added on to a health bill. And many representatives that signed on had shared with me they had not really understood the full ramifications of the parts of the discipline law that at one point seemed that there was no way that you could suspend a student for behaviors that were dangerous or inappropriate unless you went through a series of steps prior to that. That law then was changed around December of last year, making it much more safe for students at school. So, for example, when you talk about the law, it's the principal, which they always did, but now it's a message to continue doing that. You have to think of ways to re-engage the student in learning. I agree with that. When you have discipline, ultimately you want that child to come back into school. You want the behavior to not be continued, and you want them to feel like they're welcomed in the community. A specific of the law says that unless specific reasons are documented as to why such alternative remedies are unsuitable or counterproductive, or in cases where the students continue present in school pose a specific documentable concern about the infliction of serious bodily injury or other serious harm upon another person while in a school, principals shall not suspend or exclude a student. I agree with that. That's the law. We still have to follow it, but I do agree with that. I think that the idea that alternatives that are evidence-based strategies such as mediation, conflict resolution, collaborative problem solving, in particular, that one should be used. When I was superintendent of schools in Worcester, we started a contract with Boston-based hospital who was developing the collaborative problem solving. And it was true to my heart. It meant when a student doesn't behave, it's not that they don't want to behave, it's that they haven't had the chance to develop the skills that they needed in order to deal with the situation. So our job as educators and as principal and as superintendent was to make sure that the children learn the skills they needed so that the behavior would not occur. So I think, again, that we have responsibility to have safe schools for everybody.
Maureen, 3 minutes. Excuse me.
That's it.
So you can finish the statement.
Oh, okay, that we have to have safe schools for everybody, because everybody's in school to achieve academic success. And in order for that to happen, we have to have safe schools.
Thank you, Maureen. Sorry, I apologize again for cutting you off there. So we have now come to the closing statements. We have enough time here left to let each of the candidates have about 2 minutes for your closing statement. So a little more than we thought we were going to be able to give you. Feel free to use as much or as little of that as you want. So let me go back to you, Maureen, to do your closing statement. You can keep talking.
Perfect. So I am the only school committee candidate that has been a teacher, an administrator, a superintendent, and also interim superintendent. I am, as you can tell by tonight, I have the most in-depth experience, school experience. I am the only one of anyone on school committee, actually, who has directly worked with thousands of students in all levels of diversity. Anyone that truly knows me will say I'm a lifelong public servant. I've dedicated my life to educating the students of this Worcester community. In that time, I have accumulated a wealth of experience from the ground up, teacher to superintendent. I'll bring that much needed expertise and experience to the school committee, as I will work collaboratively with them to ensure the success of all our students by meeting their needs and going above that to provide opportunities that will be invaluable to their success as adults. So I ask for your support. Vote for Maureen Benenda, Worcester School Committee at large. I am the at-large candidate with the most experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Appreciate that. Tracy, you're next.
Excellent, thank you. And I want to thank you all for putting this together and for hosting. It's always really important for people to get a chance to actually hear from the candidates and hear how they perceive the job of the school committee. I think something that I have learned certainly over the course of my term on school committee is that you can run for school committee and think that it's one thing, and then you get there and discover that actually the job is something else. And as Fred noted earlier, what is the job of the school committee? We boil it down to the big four plus the negotiation with contractual bargaining units, making sure that you actually know that policy, goal setting, budget is yours, evaluation of the superintendent is yours, and not the day-to-day running of the school committee. I also will say that I think that this current school committee and this current administration, as I said earlier, I've never had so much hope and I've never been so proud, really because of the collaborative working relationship. And in terms of, people actually doing their jobs in their realms, in their roles, and also making sure that they're doing that in a way that brings in the community and that is working to benefit the students. And that really is supposed to be what that governance relationship is all about. And I've been on committees that sort of seem to have it and been on committees that didn't. This is one that does. So I want to say that, for those of you that are out there making choices in district choices, so forth, I encourage you to return as many of us as possible. But I also think that one of the things that's really most important right now is that we've just gotten a start with this administration. And I think that you saw the opinion of the school committee in adding 2 years to Dr. Monera's contract after evaluation. That's a huge vote of confidence on our part. And that says to us that we like the direction that she's set, that we have confidence in the direction she's set. And really, I would say that this election is in part about the community also deciding that they have confidence in that by supporting the school committee that has decided that. We really need to make sure that we're bringing a school committee that is moving forward on the changes in climate and culture that we've seen happening, that is faithful in terms of their use of the Student Opportunity Act dollars, which, by the way, we've only got 3 more years of, so let's make sure that we're doing it. Makes good decisions with our last year of the ESSER funding, and is having really good, strong structural conversations about making sure that we're making up the ground that we seem from the accountability system to need to make up around things like the needs of our multilingual learners, the needs of some of our children of color, and so forth. So I hope that you'll support me as one of the at-large candidates in November. Thanks.
Thank you, Tracy. Again, apologies for interrupting. And closing us out, I'll ask Sue to give her closing statement. Sue?
I feel like Worcester, like much of the nation is, we're having this election that is very hotly contested, and lots of people with a variety of experience at the table. I think that I know that one of my values is to, what I talked about in one of my other responses, is to try to bring people that I've worked with on different boards, their voices to the table. It's not about me. It is about us. It is about the system. It is really about these kids. And it is about having our residents and our families understand that we can achieve something that is pretty special here in this community. And I think that in order to do that, it is going to be listening to parents, listening to teachers, for us school committee people as it relates to our job about policy. It is not to be it is to be able to be a person at the table that is willing to listen and digest information and understand that maybe you've had this view for your life, but maybe that's not the right view. Maybe we need to alter our thinking and to think about the people that are in our community now and what they need to hear from us. I think a strength of mine is bringing those voices to the table and being inclusive and being generationally inclusive too. So as a 61-year-old lady, I'm not sitting here touting my experience every moment of the day, although I think I bring good experience to the table. I want you to know that I am very interested in making sure that our younger teachers, our younger paraeducators, our younger students feel that they have a voice in this community, and that parents can reach out to this school committee and listen with open ears to what we're going on. So I hope that you'll vote for Sue Mailman for one of the 2 at-large positions. The last thing I'll say is vocational education is my passion. I haven't talked about it, but we are investing millions and millions and millions of dollars, and we need very strong programs, and we have a ways of work to do to that regard. So I'd leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. And thanks to all the candidates, Maureen, Tracy, Sue, and Laura, who I'd leave early, for your presentations, your responses to the question. We really appreciate the time you took and the thoughtfulness in your responses. So I want to thank all the folks who came out to listen to this, all the people who are residents and voters in Worcester. And in closing, let me just encourage everyone to get out and vote. Be sure you vote. Be sure you get your friends to vote, your family, everyone you can think of that's eligible to vote. Get them out there to vote, because it's important that everyone come to the polls. So that's it. We're done.
And I'd just like to offer my thanks also to everyone who participated, and to thank the candidates, not only for participating in this forum, but also for making the decision to run. It's not an easy decision. Running is a job in and of itself, and we appreciate you putting yourselves and your ideas out to the public for their consideration. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of the day, everyone.